The avoidant person who pushed you away, who created distance when you were trying to create closeness. This person was playing a game, not consciously necessarily, not with malicious intent, but playing a game nonetheless. The game where they convince themselves they can have both. They can keep you interested and invested while never having to fully show up. They can maintain your attention and your care while never having to reciprocate at the level you're giving. They can enjoy the benefits of your consistent presence while maintaining the independence and the distance their wounds tell them they need to feel safe. They can test your boundaries repeatedly, push you away and pull you back, create chaos and then stabilize things temporarily, cycle through hot and cold behavior, and you'll stay. You'll keep trying. You'll keep absorbing the impact of their patterns. You'll keep accepting less than you deserve because you understand their wounds, or because you see their potential, or because you love who they are beneath the defenses, or because you're committed to the relationship in ways they're not capable of committing. The game was based on assumption that had always worked for them before, that people who love them will tolerate infinite amounts of inconsistent behavior, that patience is unlimited resource they can exploit indefinitely, that your investment in the relationship meant you'd never actually leave no matter how badly their patterns affected you. And for a while, maybe for months, maybe for years, the game worked. You did stay. You did keep trying. You did absorb more than you should have absorbed. You did make yourself smaller to accommodate their limitations. You did organize your life around their availability and their moods and their cycles of presence and absence. The game was working exactly as their defensive system needed it to work. But here's what they didn't account for, what their wounds prevented them from recognizing, what their defensive assumptions made invisible to them. Every game has ending. Every pattern has breaking point. Every person, even the most patient, most understanding, most committed person, has limit to what they can tolerate. And when you finally reach that limit, when you finally stop playing the game, when you finally recognize that no amount of patience or understanding or love would make them capable of meeting your needs, the game ended. Not the way they thought games ended, where they maintain control and decide when to engage and when to withdraw, but the way games actually end when you refuse to keep playing, abruptly, permanently, with them losing everything they took for granted. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, and the prize they won, the prize they're receiving right now, as natural consequence of playing games with someone who deserved genuine partnership, is exactly what they set themselves up to receive through every choice they made, through every withdrawal they enacted, through every time they prioritized their defended comfort over your legitimate needs. They won their independence. They won their space. They won their freedom from relationship demands. They won exactly what they said they wanted throughout the relationship when they were justifying their patterns as necessary self-protection. And now they're discovering that what they won isn't prize at all, it's loss. Complete, devastating, irreversible loss of the one person who was actually willing to love them through their defenses, the one relationship that was actually offering what their wounds needed, even though those wounds prevented them from accepting it. The stupid game was thinking they could keep you while continuing to push you away. The stupid prize is having successfully pushed you away permanently and discovering too late that pushing you away eliminated the only thing that was making their defended, isolated existence tolerable. The specific stupid games avoidance play, and why each one sets up the inevitable loss. The avoidant doesn't play one stupid game. They play multiple interconnected games simultaneously, each one designed to maintain their defended comfort while keeping you engaged. Understanding the specific games helps you recognize the pattern and see how each game created the conditions for the loss they're now experiencing. They play the game of testing your boundaries repeatedly, to see what they can get away with while maintaining your investment. The boundary testing starts subtly and escalates over time. They cancel plans last minute and watch to see if you'll accept the excuse and make yourself available again. They go days or weeks without meaningful communication and watch to see if you'll pursue them or if you'll wait patiently for them to re-engage. They make promises about working on themselves or being more available, and then don't follow through, and watch to see if you'll hold them accountable or if you'll let it slide. They create situations where your needs conflict with their comfort and then prioritize their comfort while watching to see if you'll accept being deprioritized. Each test that you don't enforce, each boundary you don't maintain, each disappointment you absorb without consequence teaches them they can go further next time. The game is finding your absolute limit while staying just below it to keep you engaged. But the game has fatal flaw. Eventually, you reach actual limit, and when you do, you don't announce it, or negotiate it, or give them chance to adjust. You simply leave. They were testing for your limit while assuming they'd recognize it before actually crossing it. They didn't. They discovered your limit by crossing it irreversibly. They play the game of maintaining just enough connection to keep you hoping while never giving enough to actually meet your needs or create security. This is the breadcrumbing game, the intermittent reinforcement game, the game of giving just enough warmth after a period of coldness that you believe things are improving. They withdraw for days or weeks and then suddenly show up warm and present and engaged, creating a moment where you feel like you're finally getting what you need. But the moment doesn't last. Soon, they're distant again, unavailable again, creating the cycle that keeps you hoping. The warm version is the real version that will eventually stabilize if you're just patient enough. The game works because intermittent reinforcement is more powerful than consistent reinforcement for creating persistent behavior. They're training you to keep trying by occasionally rewarding your efforts with the connection you're seeking. But the game has expiration date. Eventually, you recognize the pattern for what it is. Recognize that the warm moments are manipulation rather than genuine shift. Recognize that the intermittent rewards are just enough to keep you trapped rather than enough to actually meet your needs. When this recognition arrives, the game ends. They lose the power that intermittent reinforcement gave them because you're no longer responding to the occasional reward. You're responding to the overall pattern, and the overall pattern is unacceptable. They play the game of reframing your legitimate relationship needs as character flaws in you rather than acknowledging limitations in themselves. You express need for consistency, and they reframe it as you being too rigid or too demanding or unable to tolerate normal fluctuations. You express need for emotional availability, and they reframe it as you being needy or codependent or unable to be comfortable with healthy independence. You express need for clarity about where the relationship is going, and they reframe it as you being too focused on labels or too anxious about the future or unable to just be present. The game is making you doubt your own needs, so you'll stop expressing them, making you believe the problem is your expectations rather than their incapacity. The game works temporarily because when someone you love tells you your needs are the problem, you often internalize it. You start wondering if you are too demanding, if you should be able to tolerate more, if your needs are actually excessive rather than normal relationship requirements. But the game's flaw is that it relies on you never getting external perspective. Eventually, you talk to friends, or you go to therapy, or you read about healthy relationships, or you simply step back far enough to see clearly, and you recognize that what you were asking for was completely reasonable, that their reframing was defensive manipulation, that your needs weren't the problem and never were. When this recognition arrives, the game loses all power, and you stop doubting yourself and start recognizing their limitations for what they are. They play the game of maintaining ambiguity about the relationship's status and their feelings to keep you invested while avoiding actual commitment. They won't clearly define the relationship. They won't use labels that would indicate commitment. They won't make explicit plans for future. They won't introduce you to important people in their life or integrate you into their world in visible ways. But they also won't let you go. They maintain just enough connection, just enough suggestion of possibility, just enough ambiguous indication that this might become something serious eventually, to keep you from walking away and finding someone who would actually commit. The game is having the benefits of relationship, your care, your attention, your emotional support, your physical intimacy, without the responsibilities of relationship, accountability, consistency, actual commitment, integration of lives. The game works as long as you tolerate ambiguity, as long as you accept potential instead of requiring reality, as long as you're willing to wait indefinitely for commitment that might never come. But the game fails the moment you recognize that ambiguity serves them while harming you, that potential without movement toward reality is just perpetual disappointment, that you're organizing your life around someone who won't even acknowledge you're in actual relationship. When you stop tolerating the ambiguity, when you require actual commitment or actual clarity, the game ends, and they either have to commit, which their wounds prevent, or lose you, which is what actually happens. They play the game of coming back after pushing you away, assuming you'll always be available when they decide they're ready to re-engage. The hot and cold cycle is itself a game. They push you away through withdrawal or coldness or creating distance. You experience the push, you feel the hurt, you start processing the loss. But before you fully processed it, before you've actually moved on, they're back. They re-engage. They're warm again. They're present again. They act like the distance never happened, or like it was just natural fluctuation rather than pattern. And you, still invested, still hoping, still loving them, you let them back in. The game is assuming they can leave and return at will, that your availability is permanent regardless of how they treat you, that the door will always be open when they're ready to walk back through it. This game worked multiple times probably. They left, you waited, they returned, you accepted them back. The pattern became established, but the game has built-in ending that they don't see coming. Eventually, one of their departure cycles lasts just long enough that you complete the grief process, that you move through the pain into acceptance, that you close the door that was previously always open. When they come back this time, expecting the door to be open because it always was before, they find it closed, locked, no longer accessible regardless of how much they might want to come back through. The game worked until it didn't, and when it stopped working, it ended permanently. They play the game of taking your love and your effort for granted, assuming your investment is a permanent feature of their landscape that will persist regardless of how little they reciprocate. You showed up consistently. You were emotionally available. You communicated. You worked on yourself. You tried to understand their wounds. You were patient with their patterns. You gave effort and energy and care that far exceeded what they were giving back, and they noticed this imbalance. On some level, they recognized you were giving more, but instead of matching your effort or appreciating it or recognizing it as gift that required reciprocation, they took it for granted. They assumed this was just how you were, that your giving was personality trait rather than choice you were making, that your effort would continue indefinitely because it had always been there. The game was assuming your love was unconditional and unlimited and would never actually be withdrawn, regardless of how conditional and limited their love was in return. This game is perhaps the stupidest because it misunderstands the fundamental nature of human relationships. All relationships are conditional. All effort has limits. All patience eventually ends when it's not met with reciprocal care. You weren't actually unconditionally committed to loving someone who couldn't love you back. You were conditionally committed. The conditions were that they'd eventually recognize what you were giving and start reciprocating, that they'd work on their patterns, that they'd meet you somewhere closer to halfway. When those conditions weren't met, when the imbalance became too great, when your effort was clearly being taken for granted rather than being appreciated and reciprocated, the commitment ended. And they discovered too late that what they'd been taking for granted was the only thing making their defended life bearable. The stupid prizes they're winning now, as direct result of the games they played. The consequences the avoidant is experiencing aren't random bad luck or unfortunate circumstances beyond their control. They're specific, predictable results of specific games they chose to play. Understanding what they're actually winning helps you see the justice in natural consequences playing out. They won the independence they fought for throughout the relationship, and now they're discovering independence without connection is just isolation that nothing fills. Every time you express need for more time together, more emotional availability, more integration of lives, they resisted. They fought for their independence. They insisted they needed space, needed autonomy, needed freedom to do their own thing without having to consider partners' needs constantly. And now they have it. Complete independence, total autonomy, all the space they could want. No one requiring their time or attention or emotional availability. They can do whatever they want, whenever they want, without considering anyone else. This is what they said they wanted. This is what they fought to preserve. And now they're learning what independence actually feels like when it's not balanced with connection. It feels like loneliness, like isolation, like freedom that's indistinguishable from being completely alone. They won the independence. The prize is discovering independence without connection is empty. They won freedom from your excessive demands, which were actually just normal relationship needs. And now they're sitting with the reality that no one else will tolerate their patterns the way you tolerated them. They spent the relationship reframing your needs as excessive. Your need for consistency was too demanding. Your need for emotional availability was too needy. Your need for commitment was too pressuring. They positioned your normal relationship requirements as character flaws in you that they had to protect themselves from. And in leaving or pushing you away, they freed themselves from your excessive demands. But now they're encountering other people, dating other people, attempting connection with other people, and they're discovering something devastating. What you were asking for wasn't excessive at all. Everyone else wants the same things: consistency, emotional availability, commitment, clear communication. These are baseline requirements for functional relationship. The difference is that other people aren't as patient as you were, aren't as understanding of wounds, aren't as willing to tolerate patterns that prevent basic relationship needs from being met. They won freedom from your excessive demands, and the prize is discovering no one else will accept their insufficient availability the way you accepted it for as long as you did. They won the right to keep their emotional walls intact, and now they're learning that walls that keep people out also keep them trapped in defended isolation that prevents genuine connection with anyone. Throughout the relationship, every time you got close, every time intimacy deepened, every time vulnerability was required, they built walls, they defended, they created distance, they protected themselves from the exposure that genuine intimacy would require. You pushed against those walls gently, patiently, trying to help them feel safe enough to lower defenses. But they kept the walls up. They insisted the walls were necessary. They fought to maintain their defended state, and now the walls remain. fully intact, protecting them completely. But walls don't discriminate. They don't just keep out the people who might hurt you. They keep out everyone. They keep out new people who might actually be good for them. They keep out opportunities for genuine connection. They keep in the isolated, defended version of themselves that the walls were built to protect. They won the right to stay defended. The prize is discovering defended means alone, means isolated, means incapable of the genuine connection that would make the isolation bearable. They won the power dynamic where they controlled the relationship's pace and depth and lost the relationship entirely because eventually you stopped accepting the control that kept things at level that served only them. Power dynamics in relationship are tricky. For the entire relationship, they held most of the power. They decided when to engage and when to withdraw. They determined the depth of emotional intimacy that was acceptable. They controlled the pace of progression. You adjusted to their pace, accepted their control, worked within the limits they established. The power imbalance worked for them. They got to maintain their defended comfort while still having relationship. But power imbalances in relationships are inherently unstable because they rely on the less powerful person continuing to accept their position indefinitely. You eventually stopped accepting it. You took your power back, not by fighting for control, but by removing yourself from dynamic where you had none. They won the control. The prize is that control over a relationship that no longer exists is meaningless. They controlled it right into ending. They won confirmation that they were right about relationships being dangerous, but only because their behavior created exactly the danger and pain they were trying to avoid through their patterns. The avoidant's deepest wound is the belief that intimacy is dangerous, that getting close to someone leads to pain, that vulnerability creates opportunity to be hurt, and their patterns throughout the relationship were designed to protect against this perceived danger. But the patterns themselves created the danger. Their withdrawal created the pain of the ending. Their inability to sustain intimacy created the loss of the relationship. Their defended state created the isolation they're experiencing now. They were right that relationships involve pain, but not because relationships are inherently dangerous, because their specific patterns in relationships make loss inevitable. They created self-fulfilling prophecy. They won confirmation of their fears. The prize is that the confirmation came through, causing exactly the outcome they feared through the very behaviors designed to prevent it. They won the validation of their belief that people leave while remaining willfully blind to the fact that you left, specifically because of their behavior rather than because people are inherently unreliable. They told themselves throughout the relationship that people always leave eventually, that abandonment is inevitable, that trust is foolish because everyone disappoints you in the end. And now you've left. Their belief has been validated. They were right that you'd leave. But what they're missing, what their defensive system prevents them from fully acknowledging, is why you left. You didn't leave because people inherently abandon each other. You didn't leave because commitment is impossible. You didn't leave because you didn't care enough. You left because their patterns made staying untenable, because their emotional unavailability made genuine partnership impossible, because their inability to meet basic relationship needs made the relationship fundamentally unsustainable. The leaving they predicted arrived exactly as predicted, but it arrived as consequence of their behavior, not as evidence of their beliefs about relationships. They won the validation that people leave. The prize is a validation that's meaningless because the leaving was consequence they created, not inevitability they were powerless to prevent. Why the consequences they're experiencing are exactly what their behavior set up, and why this is justice rather than cruelty. Understanding that the avoidant's current suffering is natural consequence of their choices rather than cruel fate or your revenge helps you release any guilt about their pain while maintaining clear boundaries that protect you from being pulled back into dynamic that serve them while harming you. Natural consequences aren't punishment you're inflicting. They're results that behavior naturally produces when patterns run their course to logical conclusion. You didn't cause their current pain as act of revenge or punishment. You didn't orchestrate their suffering. You didn't intervene to make things worse for them. You simply stopped accepting treatment that was harmful to you, stopped playing games that served them while depleting you, stopped tolerating patterns that prevented genuine partnership. Everything they're experiencing now is natural result of what they chose throughout relationship. They chose to push you away. The natural consequence is that you're now gone. They chose to take your love for granted. The natural consequence is discovering that your love was conditional on being treated with basic respect and care. They chose to maintain walls that prevented genuine intimacy. The natural consequence is isolation that walls create. They chose to play games instead of building genuine partnership. The natural consequence is winning the stupid prizes those games set up. None of this is you punishing them. This is simply what happens when specific behaviors reach their natural conclusions. The pain they're experiencing is proportional to what they were actually receiving from you. The greater your love and effort and care, the greater the void your absence creates. The depth of their pain right now is actually evidence of how much you were giving, how significant your presence was, how valuable the relationship actually was, despite their patterns preventing them from recognizing or honoring the value. If you hadn't been giving much, if your presence hadn't been significant, if the relationship hadn't been valuable, your absence wouldn't create this much pain. The void they're experiencing, the loss they're feeling, the devastating recognition of what they destroyed, all of this is proportional to what they actually had and failed to appreciate. Their pain is confirmation that you were extraordinary, that what you offered was rare, that the relationship was genuinely valuable. They're not suffering because you were mediocre, and they're confused about why they feel bad. They're suffering because you were exceptional, and they destroyed something precious, and now they're experiencing the natural proportional consequence of that destruction. Their patterns guaranteed this outcome. Relationships built on games and defended distance don't sustain. They collapse under their own contradictions eventually. What they're experiencing wasn't failure of love, or bad luck, or wrong timing. It was an inevitable result of trying to maintain relationship through patterns designed to prevent genuine relationship. You cannot simultaneously push someone away and keep them close. You cannot make someone feel like their needs are excessive and expect them to continue expressing needs. You cannot take love for granted and expect love to persist indefinitely. You cannot maintain emotional walls and create genuine intimacy. The contradictions inherent in their patterns made collapse inevitable. The only question was timing. When would the contradictions become unsustainable? When would you reach your limit? When would the game stop working? But that collapse would occur was never in doubt. Their patterns guaranteed it. What they're experiencing now is that guarantee being fulfilled. The stupid games had stupid prizes built in from the beginning. Justice isn't about them suffering to balance scales. It's about them experiencing accurate feedback about what their behavior actually costs, so they might eventually choose differently. The point of natural consequences isn't revenge or punishment or cosmic balancing of scales. The point is learning. The point is that behavior has results, and experiencing those results is how people learn to make different choices. The avoidant experiencing the full cost of their patterns isn't about making them suffer to make you feel better. It's about them receiving accurate information about what their defended approach to relationships actually produces. As long as their patterns worked, as long as you stayed, as long as you absorbed the impact, as long as the game succeeded, They had no reason to change. Change is hard. Change requires confronting wounds that their defensive system was built to protect. Why would they do that difficult work when their patterns were getting them what they wanted? But now the patterns aren't working. Now they're experiencing the cost. Now they're receiving feedback that their approach doesn't actually serve them, even though it feels safer. This feedback is justice, not because it hurts them, but because it's accurate information about reality that might eventually motivate genuine change. The consequences serve you by confirming your choice to leave was right and necessary. Their suffering validates that the relationship was genuinely harmful and that staying would have meant accepting unacceptable treatment indefinitely. If they were fine after you left, if they seemed unbothered, if they moved on easily, you might doubt your choice. You might wonder if you gave up too easily, if you should have been more patient, if the relationship could have worked if you just accepted less. But they're not fine. They're clearly affected. They're experiencing significant consequences from the loss. This suffering serves you by confirming that the relationship was significant, that your presence was valuable, that their patterns were genuinely harmful enough that the natural consequence of those patterns is profound loss and suffering. Their consequences validate your choice. Confirm you were right to leave. Eliminate any doubt about whether you were too demanding or too sensitive or too quick to give up. You weren't. The relationship was genuinely unsustainable. Their current suffering is evidence of this. What their consequences mean for you and why you owe them nothing in response to their suffering. The avoidant experiencing natural consequences of their behavior creates specific situation for you. You might feel guilt or responsibility or temptation to help them through pain that their own choices created. Understanding what you owe and don't owe helps you maintain boundaries that protect your continued healing. Their suffering doesn't create obligation for you to return, to provide comfort, to help them process, or to do anything that prioritizes their pain over your boundaries. This is most important recognition. Their pain is real. Their suffering is genuine. The consequences they're experiencing are difficult and uncomfortable and possibly devastating. But none of their pain creates any obligation on your part. You don't owe them comfort. You don't owe them explanation of why you left beyond what you already provided. You don't owe them patience while they work through consequences of their own behavior. You don't owe them another chance now that they're finally experiencing the cost of their patterns. You don't owe them your participation in their healing process. Their pain is theirs to manage. The consequences are theirs to sit with. Your role is not to rescue them from natural results of their own choices. Your role is to continue healing from what their patterns put you through, and to continue building life that doesn't include them. You're allowed to feel satisfaction that justice arrived through natural consequences. This doesn't make you cruel or vindictive. It makes you human. If you feel some satisfaction knowing that the person who hurt you through their patterns is now experiencing consequences of those patterns, this is normal human response. It's not cruel. It's not vindictive. It's not evidence you're bitter or unable to move on. It's recognition that behavior has consequences, that people who hurt others don't get to escape all accountability, that natural justice sometimes arrives without your intervention. You're allowed to feel satisfied that they're finally understanding what they lost. You're allowed to feel validation that their suffering confirms your worth and the relationship's significance. You're allowed to feel that cosmic balance has been restored somewhat through them experiencing proportional consequences for behavior that was genuinely harmful. These feelings don't make you a bad person. They make you a person who experienced harm and who now observes that the person who caused the harm is experiencing natural results. This is okay. You don't have to pretend you're sorry they're suffering when their suffering is direct result of choices they made that hurt you. Their consequences teach them what your words never could, that patterns have costs, that people have limits, that love is an infinite resource that persists regardless of treatment. Throughout relationship, you probably tried to communicate. You explained how their patterns affected you. You told them what you needed. You expressed your limits. But words didn't change their behavior because words don't typically change defensive patterns built over decades. What changes defensive patterns is consequences severe enough that maintaining the patterns becomes more painful than doing the work to address them. What they're experiencing now is teaching them what your words couldn't teach, that their patterns actually cost them something precious, that your patience had limits that they eventually exceeded, that your love was an unconditional commitment to tolerate infinite harmful behavior. This learning is valuable for them, even though it's painful. It's possibly the only thing that might eventually motivate them to do genuine therapeutic work to address their attachment wounds. Your leaving and the consequences it created might teach them what nothing else could teach. This isn't about you being teacher or about you orchestrating their learning. This is just recognizing that consequences teach where words failed. The best response to their suffering is continuing to thrive, demonstrating through your own healing and growth that you're better off without them regardless of how badly they're suffering. Without you, they're suffering. That's their experience. But your experience doesn't have to mirror theirs. The most powerful response to their consequences isn't engaging with their pain or feeling bad about their suffering or considering whether you should help them through it. The most powerful response is continuing your own forward movement. Continue healing. Continue building life that's fulfilling. Continue becoming more fully yourself. Continue developing relationships that are reciprocal and healthy. Continue pursuing goals that matter to you. Your thriving while they're suffering isn't cruelty. It's evidence of truth. The truth that the relationship was holding you back, that their patterns were harming you, that removing yourself from their patterns allowed you to flourish. Your thriving is answer to any question about whether leaving was right choice. If you're doing better without them than you were with them, the choice was obviously correct regardless of how much they're suffering from the natural consequences of their behavior. Understanding the stupid games and the stupid prizes helps you maintain boundaries if they attempt contact. You can recognize any outreach as attempt to restore dynamic that serve them rather than as evidence of genuine change. If they reach out, if they apologize, if they express regret, if they claim they've changed, if they ask for another chance, understanding the games they played and the prizes they're now experiencing helps you assess their outreach clearly. Are they reaching out because they've done genuine therapeutic work and developed new capacity? Or are they reaching out because they're experiencing pain from consequences and want relief from that pain? Are they trying to restore relationship on genuinely different terms? Or are they trying to restore dynamic where you absorb the impact of their patterns so they can escape the consequences they're currently experiencing? Most outreach from avoidance experiencing consequences is about escaping the pain rather than about having developed capacity to be different. They want relief. You represent relief from the isolation and loss they're experiencing, but wanting relief from consequences isn't same as having addressed the patterns that created consequences. Maintain boundaries. Require evidence of genuine sustained change over long period before considering any reconciliation. Most importantly, recognize that you don't have to give them relief from natural consequences of their own behavior just because they're uncomfortable experiencing those consequences. Play stupid games. Win stupid prizes. They played games throughout the relationship, testing boundaries, maintaining ambiguity, taking your love for granted, controlling through withdrawal, reframing your needs as your flaws. The prizes they're winning are exact results those games set up, isolation, loss of the relationship, discovery that what they took for granted was irreplaceable, confirmation that walls keep everyone out, including people who might actually be good for them. The prizes are stupid because they're painful, they're empty, they're opposite of what actually serves human well-being. But they're inevitable results of the stupid games. This is justice, not because you intervened to punish them, but because natural consequences arrived on schedule to teach what words and patience and love never could teach. They hurt themselves. They destroyed something valuable. They're experiencing proportional pain to what they lost. And you're free. Free from the games, free from the patterns, free from having to accept insufficient love from defended person. Free to build life with people who don't play games, who show up consistently, who recognize your value while they have you, rather than only after they've lost you. The stupid games ended when you stopped playing. The stupid prizes are theirs to collect, and the freedom to build something genuine with someone capable is yours to claim. They won what their behavior set them up to win. You won what your boundaries and your self-worth set you up to win. And between those two prizes, only one is actually worth having. You're the one who has it. Never forget that.